Hi, I'm Dr. Alan Greenberg. I practice homeopathic medicine here in Las Vegas. We're located over here in the lakes, for those of you who are watching and know the Summerlin area. Today, I want to talk about what is homeopathy. So if you've seen any of my other videos, I did one on belief and reality. I also did one on placebo, because that is so important. That's the big hit on homeopathic medicine, that it's placebo. But I easily explain to you why it is not placebo, and we'll cover a little bit today also. When you get treated, when you get sick, you go to your medical doctor and you get drugs. Drugs only manage the problem. If you've watched any of my other videos, you know that this is my mantra. Stop managing your problem and finally get well. So, homeopathic medicine. The easiest way to understand homeopathic medicine is, let me give you a history lesson, and then I'll give you exactly what it is. So, first of all, back around 6,000 years ago, a guy named Hippocrates, let's call him the father of medicine, he was a Greek physician. He wrote an article called The Sacred Patient. And you can look this up online. I don't recommend you read it because it's pretty boring. But in general, what he wrote, he was writing about epilepsy, and he writes, we have to stop treating our patients like they're being struck down by the gods. And we have to treat them with respect, and we can use therapies that are with or against the body. So in other words, if you had a hot rash on your arm, let's say, you could put something cold on there, the opposite, or you could put something hot on there, the same. He understood that principle 6,000 years ago. Okay, so let's fast forward to the 1500s, and a French physician, his name was Ambrose Paré. Now, Ambrose was actually a famous physician during his time. He had figured out a way to heal gunshot wounds without cauterization. And one day he writes in his article, which you can look him up online too, he says that he was called to a tavern where the cook was scalded with hot boiling oil. He says, I went to the apothecary, the drugstore of the time, to pick up the refrigerants, cold things to put on the wounds. And he said, while there, an old village woman said to him, listen, the best thing for burns is onions and salt. And Ambrose looked at the old woman and said, are you sure? And she said, I've done this many times. So now think about that. Someone just spilled hot oil on your leg, your skin is sizzling and bubbling, and somebody wants to put onions and salt on that wound. How do you think that's going to feel? It's going to burn, right? It's going to burn worse. So Ambrose did a little experiment. On one side of his leg, he put the cold stuff, and on the other side of the leg, he put the onions and salt. And when he came back the next day to change the dressing, wherever the cold was blistered and infected. Wherever the onions and salt was laying on the skin was healing beautifully. So Ambrose showed you can make a little more pain for a few minutes and then actually start a healing process. Right? Pretty amazing. Well, let's fast forward to 1796. And Samuel Hahnemann is a physician in Germany, and he is the founder of homeopathy, the developer of homeopathy. He's not the inventor, because these laws of healing already existed, and I'm going to explain that in a sec. So he knew about Hippocrates, he knew about Ambrose, he knew about Paracelsus. These were all familiar people to him. And he decided that he was going to quit his practice as in Germany as a medical physician. Why? Because he thought back then it was barbaric. So imagine, this was the practice of medicine at the time. If you had a fever, they would slit your wrist and allow the blood to drop into a bucket. Okay, bloodletting. If you had epilepsy, they might take a hot poker and burn you and blister you. And this was the treatment. He thought this was barbaric. This was the normal treatment of the time. They taught this in the medical schools and journals. And if you didn't do this, you were going to be harassed that you didn't know what you were doing. So Hahnemann quit his job, and he decided that he would translate medical text from one language to another, because he could speak like many languages, from German to English to French. And one day he was He was translating from a guy named William Cullen. Cullen was an English physician, and he was writing an article about cinchona. Cinchona is a tree which they use the bark to cure malaria. Cullen wrote in his article that cinchona must help malaria because of its bitter and sour tastes. Hahnemann reasoned to himself, I know many, many things that are bitter and sour, and this cannot be the reason. So Hahnemann did an experiment. He was not sick. He took a dose of the cinchona in the morning, and he took a dose of it at night. And after about an hour, he writes in his article, it says, about an hour later, I got bone-crushing pains, a fever and chills and headaches and stomach aches, and it seems that the cure gives me the disease. He has an aha moment, right? Because this is the cure. They give cinchona to people that are sick with malaria. They get better. Turns out it had a high amount of quinine in it. But when taken by a well person, it gave them all the symptoms of malaria or similar symptoms to malaria without actually getting bit by the mosquito. So he has this aha moment and he starts thinking about this. A few months later in his town, scarlet fever comes. Scarlet fever back then was the plague. It would infect 50% of the children in the town or close to it and kill close to 50%. So if scarlet fever came to your home, it's going to affect both your children and one of them might die. There's a high chance. Hahnemann's looking at these children and they have, if you ever saw scarlet fever, they've got these purpley rashes, high fevers, hot heads, dilated pupils, weak, throwing up. And he says, these children look as if they have been poisoned, like they ate a berry called belladonna. So belladonna is a very poisonous berry. Now he knew this very easily because when the poor had no money, they'd go in the woods, they'd search for berries for food, they'd eat the wrong berry, and they'd make themselves very sick. They'd go to the doctor would know what the poison berry was from the symptoms, and so Hahnemann understood that now the scarlet fever children looked as if they ate the belladonna berry. But he couldn't give them the berry, could he? Because he would kill them. So what he did was he took the berry, he mashed it up in alcohol until it became a liquid. Then he added water to it. And he kept on adding water until it became non-toxic. And then he gave this solution to the children like 1 drop every hour. And guess what? They all got well. Then he gave 1 drop every hour to the children who were not sick. And none of them got sick. Remember, 50% of them were getting ill. So this was Hahnemann's first triumph in homeopathy. So what is homeopathy? Homeopathy is that if a substance in large doses, if a substance can cause a problem in a well person, that same substance that's very dilute and non-toxic can cure the problem. That's what homeopathy is. So that's what a proving is. When a homeopath picks out a medicine for a particular person, he looks at the proving, what it did to well people. So all the homeopathic medicines are experimented on human beings. They're experimented, some in very non-toxic and these diluted cures, dilutions, and that's why it can't be placebo. They also had toxicology reports for some of these things for people that got poisoned. And so this is called the law of similar. This is what homeopathy is. Homeopathy, again, is if a substance can cause a problem or a set of problems in a well person, that same set of problems in the sick person can be cured by a very dilute dose. So this is what homeopathic medicine is. This is how it works. You can see I've tried to travel you through time. It's been around forever. It's not something we made up. The idea of placebo that you see on the net is nonsense. It has been helping people since 1796. Millions and millions and millions of people all over the world have been helped. There are tons and records and tons of studies. I can't even go through it. That's for another video. Anyway, my name's Dr. Greenberg. I practice here in Las Vegas. Give me a call. I'll see you guys soon.